right?
Please, longer than they have to. We are in old business number A. We're going to introduce number A. This is a consideration of a resolution making a preliminary determination for the town council to enter into a proposed lease between the Zionsville Municipal Building Corporation and the town of Zionsville, Indiana. This was continued from the September 16, 2019 meeting. This is resolution number 2019-13. Questions councilors may have for Mr. Barry, Mayor Hawk, Mr. Lance, Mr. Dickey, Chief Knox. We can certainly continue the discussion. I just wanted to get that first agenda item started here. So I'll open it up to councilors if there are any questions.
Yeah, I have some questions, and I don't know who exactly to address them to. And I think my questions are more along the lines of just the process for this. I hear Lance. Lance has got $9.1 million on here. Matt's got $9 million on here. $5 million to develop, or the split cost for the property, to develop the property. If we've got a $6 million building out of the Parks Department, is the $3 million left over for development? And then likewise is the remaining $5 million from Lance's. I mean, is it an $8 million site to develop? Is that what we're looking at here? On a property that we already own?
I'll do my best on this one, but essentially, yes. Yeah.
Part of it is you also are paying off that lane contract that you have how much on?
Well,
That'd be an annual appropriation.
But that's not
Like 500,000.
the value.
Right, so there's a $500,000 there.
And
Out of the $8 million.
there are contingencies built into this as well as with any project. And I think probably that's around $1 million per each bond issuance. Just going off the top of my head. So yeah, but that's a pretty accurate statement. Numbers may be tweaked a little bit here and there.
Is that unusual, or is that I know the same thing that Councilor Plunkett did. That seemed high for just site work before you put up even a building, or what's driving that?
We don't do a lot of site development work.
Okay.
We review a lot of projects, but we don't initiate them. But we take these numbers based on HWC Engineering, who does do a lot of site work. Specifically, they did the site work for Creekside Corporate Park, as well as the architectural firm. So we are using their numbers that they derive from their experience in the industry.
Do you know if that included bringing utilities to the location?
That does.
Okay.
And that would go out for bid, I assume?
It will follow the available purchasing statutes. Yes, there are some new. The town doesn't get into these too much. I won't go too into depth, but instead of a traditional design bid build scenario, there's guaranteed contract pricing. When you're building structures, there are some more bidding options available under state statute, but all laws will be obviously followed, yes.
And the $8 million is assuming all the projects are approved.
Well, the specific to the 9.1 for streets and stormwater, that's just for our site development costs at our buildings. Everything else, the parks is roughly $9 million for their facility there that would match ours. So you're looking at roughly $18 million for the marrying of the two projects on a common campus. The rest of these, we haven't quite got yet to here, I don't believe. We didn't get that far along in the presentation, which is the Overly Warman Park and some other parks projects that came about as a result of community demands from their public input processes.
Would there be an impact if the streets complex was approved but not the parks complex in terms of site work and cost?
Yes, and vice versa, because we have shared generally 50-50, some prorated of those common infrastructure costs. We have to go off-site for sewer. We've got to go across the road, down the street, into the neighborhoods to get sewer. We're splitting those costs. So if one or the other were approved, no single project with the amounts that are presented this evening could build its own project.
Okay.
So, just for sake of clarity, exactly how much are we talking about for the project in totality to develop this property? You just said 8 million?
Just for the land, that's not even buildings.
That's just to make the land
Well,
shovel-ready.
Make it
that's
viable,
also the
right.
utilities. I mean, we've got to bring big power in, we've got to bring water in, we've got to bring sewer in, we got to get fiber in there. So there's a lot of support necessary for this, but
Sure.
yes,
Yeah.
Just to make
that's
it
correct.
shovel-ready. Then after that, we're looking at how much to actually construct and make these projects come
Well,
to life.
that's beyond shovel-ready, because that's including the drainage, the ponds, the detentions, the mounding, the landscaping. Of the 9.1 that was proposed for my specific project, and I can't speak to parks because I barely have mine all committed to memory, the $4 million was for vertical construction. So the balance of that is our proration of the utilities of the site. It's about $1 million in contingencies. And then the rest is the utilities, the site preparedness. So it's not just shovel-ready, that's like building pad-ready.
Okay.
That's like the streets and the parking lots and all that stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know, Lance, if this is something you're prepared to answer now or can answer now, but what's Plan B? I mean, if where we're at now is unacceptable, it's overflowing, we're not operating efficiently, the comparison we got was current and expand and use the town hall. What if it's not expand and use the town hall? What if it's do something up there or make this smaller or scale? I'm just trying to find an alternative here.
Sure. I think historically, with the limited projects that the town has undertaken, in my tenure, a couple of town halls. I came in, as that building was in its infancy, but I was not here when it was built, when Municipal Facilities was built. I think that we have, and I will also admit this from my council days as well, when I was in your seats making some decisions on the town hall that no longer exists. I think we've been reluctant to take a real look at the cost of a growing and expanding community, and we've planned for tomorrow when we should have planned for next year. These are big numbers, absolutely, and they're daunting numbers. But it's going to be necessary to provide these facilities at some point in the future. You can debate whether it's now the time, and we kind of alluded to this fact earlier, that we believe all three departments are demonstrating operational deficiencies now. Keep in mind, from once the time that this financing would be approved, if it would be approved, we're talking 2 years to occupancy. So that's 2 years for the chief to add a couple more police officers or not do it because we can't accommodate it. Same with our departments. I think they carry a little bit more weight than we do, but we try harder. So back to your original question, I don't want to speak for any future elected officials or governance of this community, but as has been discussed or mentioned on this board, was there are new council members that will be coming in to replace some of you next year. Perhaps they would be interested in vetting this topic, so that may be taken up with that board. So, not speaking for the leadership, I think there might be another attempt at this with a new group, maybe not. If it fails on all fronts, we will have to take some good hard look at what we can cut, what we can get rid of, where we can store things, and what we can do. I can't speak for how Rob or anybody else can run their operations. We will have to get compact. We'll have to take a good hard look at any and every option available to us. We're not going to stop operating, but
Well, and I think my point in that is, I think all you guys do a great job maximizing everything you can. My point is, how can we look at this proposal or this project and what you need next year or the year after, to your point, and scale this down or make it a little more palatable?
okay, understand the question now, thank you. And I'm going to say yes, but to a significant degree, no. We've already shrunken our climate-controlled operational space and compensated, reduced the overall square footage, but made it more efficient and reduced the more costly heated facility. Where we'd start to step over dollars to chase pennies. Reducing the cost of the footprint of the building, do we lop off a couple of offices? Sure. Is that going to make, in the economies of scale, in the broad scheme of things, is cutting off 500 square feet or 1,000 square feet going to make a significant decrease in the funding necessary? No. You're going to have the same site prep. You might be paying $1 or a penny less per square foot of building costs, but in the overall, just from my perspective, from the overall project cost, shrinking it is not going to give you an appreciable savings. Your leap would be to, not do something, I believe.
Would it possibly be less expensive to find another piece of property that doesn't take $8 million to develop, where you could spend that $8 million on a lot of dirt somewhere else that might have utilities?
Any place that we're going to find 20 plus acres is not going to be served by utilities, and it's going to be probably more costly. We're lucky that this site is adjacent and across the road from the backbone of the utilities necessary for it. To find a parcel this size, I think anywhere else, you're not going to find them with utilities that close.
The 20 acres is for everybody and everything, right? Not just for your department or...
Correct. Yeah, it's about 24 acres all told. About half and half are split between our facilities and the parks.
So theoretically, we could potentially find maybe two smaller places that would provide the same utilization, or try to figure out.
I still think we'd be challenged to find even 10 acres that was already served by utilities. And then if you find two sites of a smaller size, you're essentially doubling your utility costs because you're going to bring utilities to each site. I really think that this site is optimal for a number of reasons. One, you only got utilities to one site to serve two agencies. Geographically, I think I made this comment earlier, you're not going to find 24 acres that is as centrally located from our operational aspect within our community. Right now, I frankly love where we are. I like walking to work. I enjoy a lot of things being about a quarter mile as a crow flies from my office. But for the good of the department, the good of our operations, we're kind of tucked away in a corner of our community. This is going to be more centrally located, and it's only going to become more centrally located as we continue to expand. That's where our services are going to be in demand. So we're reducing our travel time to and from job sites with this location. I don't think we'll find a better site geographically or a less expensive site to develop.
I think the other thing to take into account is if we looked at another piece of property that already had utilities run to it, it would be priced a whole lot higher just as a purchase price than what we have now.
It very likely, yes, those capital, somebody's going to want to recoup their costs.
That's why I asked
if they
if
bring,
it's $8 million.
nobody brings utilities to a site and then goes, this is great, I'm done, they've got an end game. So they would either develop that or they'd want their development costs recouped in a sale.
Lance, did you all do a comprehensive review of what it would take to rehab the facility that we currently use now?
We did not do a comprehensive because those of us who've worked in that building for you guys over here, since it was built, we just know that based on, you can just look at it and say, where would you put 5,000 square feet on the site? You can't do it with the building. The building's kind of centrally located. There are no perimeter areas that are suitable for expansion areas. For everything that would be added to the site, something would be lost. If you wanted to add offices, you'd lose parking. If you wanted to add warehouse, you'd lose offices. So you'd be constantly trading because the site, or size-wise, does not support an increase in use of the footprint of use on the site.
You mentioned the flow-through on the facility wasn't good. Is there a way to change the doors, essentially, to open up different spaces so that it's a drive-through?
No.
And that's because we don't have any perimeter property on it, or?
If you opened up, the only option to open a door, you'd drive through the offices. You'd have to, because the building is, on our side, is long rectangle. So you've got a garage back here, and you have offices up here. On this side, you have the Sally Port and the police facility, so there's no door options there. Any door there, you create the same movement restrictions. If you went straight through our barn, you go into our offices. So we can't, specific to that element, we would enjoy at a new site. We can't do that on site right now.
But if you got somebody in there to look at it comprehensively and give you an architectural redesign where you can actually put a second floor or reconstruct in such a way that you have better usage of it, is that something that you've considered? And I'm
Again,
saying
that
this
would-
because we're going
yeah.
through this right now. We're rebuilding an entire building and adding wings and.
We had, a couple of years ago, we looked at some options to increase the space, and we utilized the services of CSO. And we just said, what would it take to get an office or so and increase our warehouse space? And this is probably 5 years ago, and that alone is $2 million. Going up a second story, originally, the foundation, the footings were not constructed for a two-story building. A lot of it is steel frame that is not structurally designed and built to support a second story. So the amount of money I would anticipate necessary to make a second story structurally feasible would be cost prohibitive. You might as well build a new building.
Is that an option to tear it down? And I mean, I know that there's a lot to take into consideration with where would we go if we did that, but I mean, is that property, that's a nice piece of property. Could you tear it down and rebuild?
Again, we don't have the footprint to expand. We could tear down, you could potentially tear down a building, build 2 stories, you've solved some office space needs and maybe some storage needs, but you haven't solved any of the equipment needs for any of the 3 departments. And really, all you could do is go vertical for the most part, and you can't go warehouse space, storage space, garage space vertical. You can't get a second story of that.
How many acres are you gonna be on in your portion of the
Roughly 10.
and how many acres are you on here?
I think 6. With a good portion of that is protected wetlands. We can't expand to the west because those are wetland areas.
And is there any expansion possibility anywhere, east, south, north?
Not to any significant degree. Again, any building expansion removes our operational space, removes our outside storage. Any changes in footprint there is going to be at the sacrifice of something else.
If we don't do anything, fast forward 5 years, are we gonna have to cut services? Like not pick up leaves anymore, or not do things for the parks, or not have enough police?
We'll do everything within my power to maintain the level of services we have today. What we will start seeing is greater equipment replacement rates, because more and more is going to be stored outside. And particularly, I will go back and talk about the salt barn, because that's my very favoritist element of this site. There will be extreme operational challenges in 3 to 5 years if we do not get some type of significant capacity increase in that. Other than that, we're getting ready to take a delivery of our first tandem truck, one of the largest truck we've ever purchased. So we got a brand new, very expensive truck that's going to push some very expensive trucks we already have out in the open.
So I might ask something that sounds redundant, and perhaps has been asked before, but is there any level of concern or second thought about building a structure that houses these kinds of machines? I think you said, I wrote it down somewhere. Oop, I don't know where I put it, but it was something like 28 vehicles and 50 pieces of unique equipment.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct? Mm-hmm. And that is going to be housed right next to our brand-new nature center?
We're probably 1,000 feet away, I guess. But right now, we're 10 feet from them. Parks Department, anyway.
Well, right, but it's not the nature center, right? And the whole idea, I mean, one of the things when I go to the nature centers, I go the trails, the quiet, I mean, you go to nature centers to engage in nature, right? And this is one of the concerns I've had.
Well, we've separated that. We've separated our facility and specifically our operational spaces. So you have the parks facility closer to 875 on the site. And then I'm guessing 1,000 plus feet till our office building. and then several hundred feet to the end of our building, and then our operational space. So, you know, we're right alongside of a trail right now, as I mentioned. I think this is a better scenario than we have right now as far as intrusion into the public use of public spaces and parks experiences.
But you'd be right next to a trail here too.
A little further away, but yeah, yep.
Right, yeah. And so you would have the trucks going right in front of the nature center, correct?
We have a separate drive. That's why the site was laid out with a separate drive for us. There is a distinct drive for the nature center and for the park experience. Our drive is removed as far south and as away as possible. We will not be going through, and that was a very key design element that we looked at. We will not be going through the parks facility to get going around it.
How would this project compare to other cities around us, towns, to their similar departments?
You know, the only comparison that I really have paid much attention to is Carmel. I've looked at some of the facilities and looked at how they did their operations. Some believe in a singular building, kind of a large, massive centerpiece building, and do as much out of there as you can. The Carmel Street Department has a very campus feel. They have lots of low-lying brick buildings. They've sprawled out. Like I said earlier, when we're recreating kind of what we have now, we polled our staff, we looked at some other operations, and we said, other than the limitations of size, space, and accommodations, what's wrong with what we're doing? What don't we like about how we operate? And we really couldn't pinpoint anything specifically, so that's why we looked to recreate our facility. We based it on what we see as our needs, not as a comparison to someone else, not to try and get bigger than someone else. We've seen our truck fleet grow incrementally X number of years. We're growing a vehicle per year. Here's our space need. Here's our projected 5-year space need. You know, CSO calculated all that. So we designed to our needs rather than what we thought what we liked about somebody else's.
And a space planning company helped with that and said, well, if this is your needs, this is what it needs to look like.
Yeah, the disciplines within the CSO group, the architects, you know, who design commercial buildings like this and are familiar with fleet management, fleet growth, they inventoried, they interviewed us and my staff to get a sense of historic growth patterns, et cetera, so that they could do a forecast and base their size now and then with future capacities of what we might experience if our trending continues.
So it wasn't just Lance, it was somebody that does this for a living. They're kind of like this building. That's, a lot of people said this is too big, but we had space people that said.
I wanted to be able to tell people that a professional evaluated our needs and designed the space, not me.
Were they given a budget to start with and backed into it to design the needs, or did they
No.
design the needs and then you
No, the needs drove
budgeted
the
for it?
budget. The needs drove the budget.
And if this portion, street and stormwater portion, is approved, and then say the Parks Department portion of the campus is denied, does that kill your deal as well, since you're splitting?
At the
some-
current funding levels, yes.
So you'd have to come back and ask?
We
for-
would have to,
You'd have to ask
we
for
would have
12.
to parse out those costs and vice versa if theirs were approved and not the streets and stormwater. Yes, we would have to identify those costs. We have to come up with some kind of makeup somewhere.
All right.
So if, when we made the case to build this town hall and looked at all the operations that could be brought in to this town hall, we made the decision then not to bring over streets or any of the major.
We, and those of you involved in the town hall or in the room here, no, it was never a consideration. It was never discussed with me moving any operations here in the future, and certainly not police. And I don't know about parks, but I don't think we were ever considered for the long-term plan for this building.
But theoretically, the building's large enough where your administrative staff could be here for a short period of time until, you know, you work out the expansion question here and potentially even, you know, figure out, you know, what the real, maybe a better solution that's not as costly as this for the community. And if you had a year or two under the belts, maybe the growth, the proposed growth and the tax revenue increases would would demonstrate itself and allow a lot more flexibility in what you want to do, and/or that the new town council could, plan a budget that thinks ahead of this need. I know we used to kind of do that in fire at one point. They used to start setting aside funds for fire, and maybe the chief remembers that, but I remember hearing that before, where they would start setting funds aside for fire to prepare
Like we-
for.
That's our budget.
That's in this budget. That's why you keep saying we're spending more than we're taking in, is
Well, I
because
know,
we
but
saved
in the
up
past,
money
but
and now
again,
we're
yeah,
spending
but we
it.
haven't done that in this budget for parks, and is it in the budget for the park and the?
Well, the parks, I know, they did do some, what was it? There was something they saved for, Matt? Yeah.
Portions of the irrigation project, we were earmarking out of
That's
our
it.
fund and trying to work that into the budgets, and it was gonna take longer, which is why the mayor asked you folks to come with a little more to the table of one of the processes. And just a couple things, I was
Does the
standing up
current
here.
budget have the $26 million of debt financing in it?
You're talking about the fire station.
I didn't hear the question, but
Years ago, we did.
No,
years ago, I guess.
it doesn't have that in there because we wouldn't be responsible for it for 2 or 3 more years. So they're not gonna have, that's not in the current budget. That's what I was asking last time, like it's not in there.
Because it's not projected yet.
Right.
Right.
But I think the reason I was asking that earlier is because it seems to me that when we built this town hall, when we went through a building expansion, any kind of facility like this, we went through a fairly robust group of meetings to build up this town hall. And it seems that we've been presented with the option of building this or not building this, not as Jason was saying earlier, what are those medium options? What if we were to bring in the administrative offices to town hall and remodel that building to, house the other needs? What are the other options we haven't explored? I feel that we're being given the option of getting the town into a $26 million bond debt situation or nothing. And it
That
seems
wasn't
that-
Mr. Lance's presentation. The options, right? No build, expand current site, come to town hall.
That's right, but none of that has been broken down to a cost analysis or projection of what would that look like. It's just an
I
option.
would say that the difference between what is being proposed now and what town hall is, that was a very difficult question to weigh against. We had a facility. What do we do with that? Do we massively remodel it? Is it worth tearing down and building new? Those are, very difficult and challenging questions to wrestle with. Here, we're getting out of the police department's way. We're not, what is the future? We're not wrestling with the future of our site. We know the future of our site. So, I suppose, any studies could be done. It would be my professional opinion that any cost analysis done in beyond the scope of what I covered in my presentation would only be substantiated as prohibitive or irresponsible spending, because you're not going to get as much for your dollar and you're going to be undoing things in a couple of years. So I think that's one thing to keep in mind, that we're not thinking, can we keep this building? Should we keep it? Should we repurpose it? There's no question that there's a continued use of that building. It's what to do with the 2 departments who need to get out of the police department's way.
And as I recall, and I don't remember if it was in a council meeting or if it was in one of the planning meetings for the town hall, but from that point, I recall it being said, look, the next thing that needs to be addressed is the police station, street and stormwater. So I don't think this should really be, the price tag might be a surprise, but just the fact that we're looking at this shouldn't be a big surprise to anybody.
Oh, I don't think that-
I agree with
it's not
you.
a surprise that we're looking at this, but it seems to have gone from, we were looking at it, and we knew that it was something that needed to be addressed, and suddenly it's $26 million was rolled up and we were asked for it all at once in one. And now you're parsing it out and you're explaining it, and it's great walking through it, but it's still being bundled up as we were going from 0 to $26 million, and it's been kind of fast, and I'm glad that I wish that we would have led with this presentation before we were even issued and given the ask at all. So this has been really a great informative session, but I'm still processing it.
Thank you. We learned from the first ones. We're getting better. Remember, the $26 million includes the 2 items you're not discussing yet: Overly Warman Park and the Big 4 Rail Trail.
Oh, I'm aware of that, but they were
So, but
packaged
we're-
as like we they were brought to us all at once. And
Well, that was at the direction of the Parks Board and based on public input, so. But this has, and Counselor Trailer is right, even before we occupied this building, we said, we kind of laid out a strategic timeline of what is next. We said, when we bought the property, full well knowing that the combined 25 acres would house the Parks Department and the Street and Stormwater Department. So that process started well over 3 years ago. And there were many design sessions and input sessions in meeting with the CSO to explore the what-ifs. And, it started out as a larger project, but then as Lance said, they drove it down to a more manageable project.
Mayor, we haven't seen that it's actually manageable financially. We just have not seen that.
I think Mr. Berry's presentation showed
He
that.
did a half-assed job. Let's make that real clear. I asked about cash in and cash out, was not given a straight answer on that.
Sir, you can save the insults for after the meeting.
Yeah, shut up, Tim.
Tom,
Be a professional
come
for
on.
once.
please.
Just be a professional.
Hey,
Go ahead.
well,
What do you-
I don't like to get lied to all the time. I find it rather offensive.
Oh, I think we all find some things offensive.
Yeah.
Can we call somebody out of order, please?
Well, we need to go to couples counseling here after this meeting. Is there any other questions that counselors have on this? For A, B, and C, Counselor Hopper, you mentioned needing more time. If there were to pass this meeting, there's still a final vote we would have to make at our next meeting. I'll open it up to any other questions. For me, this is betting on ourselves and betting on our future. I don't think what Mr. Lance and Mr. Dickey and the rest have done is create a Taj Mahal. I think it's creating a roadmap for our future, and I'm supportive. So thank you for the effort.
Would we have to vote on each one individually?
We would have to vote on each one individually, although if A didn't pass, voting on B and C would not matter. I would like to consider D and E separate issues because those are specific parks as opposed to this complex. So we've got Resolution 2019-13. Any other questions?
Real fast, sorry.
Yeah, please go for it.
It's my first time being on this side of the table.
Yeah.
Usually sitting up there. So just to be clear, so on the stormwater side, if you adopt the resolutions, there will be a notice published in the newspaper, an option for petition remonstrance. It will come back. You'll adopt another resolution. You'll have another notice and hearing on the lease. There are several other things that have to happen for the stormwater project, so it is not like this leaves tomorrow or tonight or even the next meeting. There will be at least a couple more after this. You're right on the ordinances for the park district. That would be a first reading, and then you would have a second reading, and then it would basically move back to the Parks Board to go through the rest of the procedures.
So on A, we're looking at, counting tonight, 3 votes at a minimum.
Sorry, say
For
that again.
A, we're looking at a minimum of 3 votes,
To-
counting tonight, if we voted on it tonight.
Well, you're going to have multiple here. Yeah, you're going to have multiple. This is just the preliminary determination.
Right.
Then you'll have.
Can I stop it with, so I think that the question that Councilor Spees has is good, because is this going to be wrapped up before year end? It will be, I mean, if it's multiple, so we only have 6 more meetings?
5 more meetings
5 more meetings?
after, not including this meeting.
Okay, so there's if it's not wrapped up by then, we're driving the boat and jumping off of it when the new council will be coming on. So that's-
I mean, I think as long as we didn't keep continuing items,
Okay.
it would get through this council's session through the end of December.
Sorry, Adam Sturwald, Barneston, Thornburg.
If
Thank you.
this is voted down in this particular meeting, will it be able to be brought back? Or does it have to wait a year? What's the process on this guy?
You could bring it back. It's not like a zoning requirement before the plan commission, whereas if it's denied, you have to wait a year unless it's substantial change. You can bring it, turn it right around and bring it right back.
So basically, you
But-
can vote it down and not kill it. You could it could go back to the drawing board, it can get whatever design changes and come back.
But you've already had one public hearing on this? Or two public hearings? So we would have to publish another notice, so we couldn't get to we couldn't publish until next Wednesday, couldn't have a meeting until 10 days after that. You need to have two more public hearings to get back to where we are now, let alone then the extra few more meetings that we need. So,
That's if it was denied.
all right, that's if it was not even going to bring it back. I'm saying that we would be a month to 6 weeks away from getting back to this point that we are in the process.
Which is fine, I just want there to be clarity on process, because
Right.
that, I think, was an original question is, if there are changes to be made, if there are things to readdress or revisit, it can certainly come back in whatever change of time. You don't have to wait a year, you don't effectively kill the project. That's
Yeah.
what I was trying to get to.
I think it would be prudent if there's reticence among the council to continue it, not to vote it down, if this is still something the council wishes to potentially approve. Does that make sense? So that then that clock isn't restarted.
Right.
The public hearing.
And if it was restarted, it would likely fall to the next council.
I think that, yeah, it's not necessarily true, but it's likely, depending on how long this one's taken, yeah. That's right.
Any other questions on process, project, numbers?
Would it be possible for Crow to do a comparison for like 2022, if we did not do this, what the budget might look like, or if we did do it, what would that budget look like? Would that be a huge task to do?
You're asking what the budget, the town budget would look like, or?
Correct. Would that be
Well, the town budget the only difference would be your debt service levy would not be there.
so if we didn't do it, that's going to go down, we'd have to get it to go back up.
And
2
so
years
what
from
would
now.
happen is you would see a reduction from 1 year, and then if you were to approve it, say, next year or the year following, whenever, then you would see an increase in that levy. So you would see, instead of a leveling out of the tax levy, you would see fluctuation.
Speaking, I did have one quick question on budgets. Has there been an estimate made by the town as to the cost implication of maintenance and the operations of these buildings that we would see in the next, because I know in the first, this is not going to be seen in today's budget or in the budget, but in a year and a half, 2 years, when you're getting ready to staff it, maintain it, run it, do we have estimates of what the annual maintenance cost of these buildings would be? Poor Lance. I'm sorry, Lance. Going back and forth. You're getting your exercise today.
No detailed maintenance estimate has been provided, nor utility costs and the operating costs. We currently enjoy some discounts with utilities. We could look at something like that. We don't pay the utilities directly out of our budget. It comes out of the general fund.
Yeah.
So we have to look into that. But, maintenance-wise, I believe collectively we budget so about $160,000 a year to maintain an old, throw in some contracted mowing for another $5,000 to maintain a 20-year-old building. Well, those would kind of be one-time expenditures. I was looking at operational costs.
Trying to, when you add, I don't know how many 1,000 square feet, there has to be some sort of cost
Absolutely, yeah.
estimation as to what this is going to cost the town to run. And
Until the design, the architectural design has not been completed because that was not in the scoping budget that we had. What produced that was a survey of the site and a design, what's called design development level plans. But no utility expenses have been forecast. And maintenance would be nominal, at least for the first 5 or so years.
Given, I suspect, most counselors have their vote made up and the timing. I don't want to rush anyone if there's other questions, but if we're ready to vote too, I would take a motion on this.
I'd move to approve.
I will second. I'm going to do a roll call vote. By voting yes, you are voting to approve. No, you're voting not to. Counselor Schuler?
Am I supposed to vote nay? Is that the vote I want here?
Yes, I don't want to tell you how to vote, but if you don't want this to happen, vote
I
nay.
don't want this to happen.
Okay, that's a nay. Counselor Hopper?
No.
Okay. Counselor Suarez?
No.
Okay. Vice President Trailer?
Yes.
I am a yes.
I'm a yes.
Counselor Plunkett? Okay. Motion fails to pass with a vote of 3 in favor, 4 opposed. Do we need a second motion then to deny it?
You must deny the other two.
Pardon me?
You must vote to deny.
No, but I'm saying because there was no, because it failed to pass, do we just move on to B?
You just move on to B.
Yeah. We have to vote on those as well?
Yes.
Okay. So,
Go ahead.
Change that to a continuance instead, so it doesn't restart the clock.
No,
well, we've already voted, so
Okay.
it's set. Next, B is a consideration of a resolution approving form of lease for street stormwater building and calling for public hearing on lease. This is continued from the September 16th, 2019 meeting. This is resolution number 2019-14. Are there motions on this?
Given the result of A, I would make a motion to deny.
I've got a motion to deny. I've got it from Vice President Traylor, second from Councilor Suarez. All in favor of denying?
Aye.
All opposed? Me?
Yeah, me too.
Okay. So let me just make sure I get this right. Resolution 2019-14 does not pass with a vote of 2 in favor, 0 opposed. Correct? Or the motion was to deny, right?
So sort of an
it's
odd structure, but,
Right.
but regardless, that the motion was
Isn't-
denied
did not pass
unanimously
5 to
by the
2.
council.
Yes.
Not unanimously.
I'm sorry, there were 2 votes
Two
There were 2
votes.
votes.
against, okay,
Against
forgive me, all
denial.
right, 5 to 2.
5 to 2.
That's right.
Correct. C is a consideration of an ordinance approving Series 2019A Park District bonds. This is the park complex at the former Rail Trails Gardens property. This is continued from the September 16th, 2019 meeting. This is ordinance number 2019-16. Motions on this. Oop, can't take that motion.
Move to deny.
Okay, I've got a denial from Councilor Suarez,
Second.
second from Councilor Hopper. All in favor of the denial?
Aye.
All opposed? Aye. Motion to introduce ordinance number 2019-16 on first reading. I'm going to probably phrase this wrong. Does not pass 5 to 2. Am I phrasing that correctly? It fails to pass
Fails to be
5
introduced.
to 2. Okay, we are going to switch gears here because we are switching to actual bonds related to parks themselves and not the parks complex. And so this is number D. This is a consideration of an ordinance approving Series 2019B Park District bonds. This is for improvements at Overly Warman Park. Mr. Dickey, do you want to start on this?
Yes. This is this section slide put together by Amanda and the town. So as you can see, this bond amount for Series B bonds is $3,375,000. This is for the items for Overland Park. A little bit later, Park Board President Jeff Edmondson will be talking about the process that we use to develop these. But the type of features that would be in here are several miles of trails. There'll be multi-purpose trails, walking, hiking type things, running, mountain biking, those sorts of things. Up to 3 miles of trails, versus the concept, if it is achieved by the conceptual design and you approve this full amount. Small playground area, small shelter, fishing pier, fishing deck kind of thing, not a pier into the water. There's a pond on the side. Boardwalk, 9-hole disc golf. If it's fully funded, a pump track, which is kind of like BMX bikes, ups and downs, reforestation, prairie area wildlife, because you'll recall the site was and you've seen the conceptual documents in the earlier states when this plan was presented to you, but was a heavy-duty construction site, reclamation of concrete and those sorts of things. So a lot of dump truck tracks and things across it, a lot of invasive species. So working on those stuff. This is the property that's being donated in parcels by the Von Terra subdivision coming across to us. We've received a couple transfers of that. There's still some transfers out remaining, from what they're telling us, should be before the end of the year for those last pieces come to us, what they have told us just this week. So those are the type of features in there, just general park amenities, parking, those sort of things. So questions on that piece, or and I can go into, well, I guess the next section I think has to do with C, so.
Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't there a discussion of a dog park somewhere in?
There is in the 5-year master plan, and it is a part of the capital projects in the 5-year master plan. This site being mostly floodplain would not be appropriate because of the
okay.
E. coli introduction to the waterways. Back when Gavin was participatory in the process, the stormwater side,
Yeah.
that would raise some eyebrows. So
Gotcha.
you can see some of the work we did, and we had public input meetings, and Jeff will talk about these in more general, but public input meetings, design charrettes. Many of you were invited to, and several participated to the focus groups from the elected side of things. So, yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, I just recall several discussions in the charrettes and the other conversations.
Yeah, and it's
about
still
that,
on
so.
the park board's
Great.
hope to get to that. but
Thank you.
And Matt, you mentioned that they hadn't transferred all the property over yet? I'm sorry, Suzanne.
They're doing it because they, as they're developing Von Terra, like in Part B, say, for example, which has been transferred, they didn't want to have to worry about where the line is if they transferred to it ahead of time, and they were building those lots against it and grading those. This allows them to do their grading development. When they're done with that, they plat that, and 30 days after the platting of that whole property, they have to, by agreement, transfer over that portion.
Do you have an expectation on when that will be completed?
Yeah, as I mentioned, and sorry if I was mumbling and going too quick, but they mentioned just this week that they're looking at, before the end of this year, that last parcel coming across to us, the Von Terra, Keith Lash, and the people we talk with there. Yeah.
So this is saying that we are not adopting.
Here's some of, these are from the charrette process, so again, these will look familiar to you, but these are some of the conceptualizations done by the consultant firm that was doing that. Disc golf, or walk at the wetland, Big Four rail trail access, because, you know, we would anticipate extending the Big Four rail trail down to this as part of the, it's really in the trails bond, but we did the planning for it all at the same time on that piece of the Big Four, mountain bike trails.
What is the timeline for completion of the park?
If you fully pull the trigger on this, we'd be similar to the road project. You'd be looking at construction, documentation, and design in a year, you know, and starting the construction in a year. It might run over, you know, over 1 year, because it's a be, you know, as you can see, a, you know, $4 million project, so $3 million project, but nearly 4. So it'll be a big chunk at one time, but certainly by the end of 2 years of construction, so 3 years at the outside probably. Hope we don't have a spring like this spring that we had.
Great, thank you.
And that's all we have on Series C, other than when we get to the end of this, or Series B, when we get to the end of Series C, Jeff will talk about the process. That's how we had it set up, unless you want to bring them in now.
It's at Park Board's president, Park Board, however, Jeff, however you want to handle it, you want to speak? Yeah, okay, great.
Want me to go
Oh,
ahead
so
and-
just for clarification, we are kind of blending D and E together from a presentation
Okay,
standpoint.
so I'll
We'll
just
certainly
go ahead
vote
with-
on them
Yeah,
separately.
I'll move on Series C bonds, and then we can have Jeff and go to that. So, Series C bonds, which are various trail improvements, and it's written this way, while the rail trail is a major focus of this, when we did the park bonds for Mulberry Fields, as they got attractive bidding, that enabled us to spend some money on Turkey Foot, which was in that as a potential in the bond, and Elm Street Green. This is worded for trail purposes, so that if we get attractive bidding and such, that what we're planning on the Big Four rail trail is completed, and we still have some trail money you can spend on park trails, say in Turkey Foot, or, you know, some other park related to that. So that's why it's worded that way, as various trail improvements, even though the rail trail, most of what you'll hear is related to the rail trail. That's for $4,305,000 if it's fully approved. It would be to finish the Big Four to the northwest to the common boundary of Whitestown. It would be to anticipated to extend the rail trail southward from its current end at Eagle Creek down to Zionsville Road. and also pave that small half-mile section that's currently crushed aggregate now, so that you'll have more variety of use in there than the current crushed aggregate allows. It anticipates a south trailhead off of Zionsville Road, a small area down there with a small parking area, and then a restroom as well. So you'd have a restroom clear at the south end to kind of match the restroom in the middle. And then it would also anticipate beginning resurfacing of some of the oldest pieces of Big Four rail trail that we have currently in here. It's starting to, heave up here and there with roots, and the pavement's starting to crack from the oldest. Our oldest pieces are in the 90s, so it's getting to the point where those start to begin. If possible, from a feasible point of view, when you get to construction documentation, it would be kind of a foot by foot or tens of feet at a time. But you'd be looking at trying to widen some of our oldest pieces that are only 8 feet wide, if we can eke out a little bit more on either side with before you get to the ditch lines and things, without having to do a lot of major regrading. So that would be looked at by the engineers at that time. So it may do some of that at the same time.
So would these be those GO bonds also?
Yes, they would be funded the same way out of the general obligation situation, but they would be against the park cap, not the town's cap. And monies, if you decided not to spend this, it doesn't save you any monies to use elsewhere, because by state law, they can only be used on park projects.
But if we were pretty much maxed out.
You're not maxed out now.
Yeah.
No, I know. If before.
You recall from
if these get approved, then there's no way the others are going to get.
No. When he talked about, if you'll recall, the 235 left it, if you would approve all the park bonds at one time, right now, if I remember right, by next year, that would be close to $1 million of leftover room.
That would include these two.
It would include these two as well. And by 2022, I think it's close to $3 million of room, but certainly more. So, and what Deputy Mayor is referring to is, if you don't have the A-series bonds on here, you just have more room on that calculation.
No, I get that now.
And then Jeff, if there are no questions particularly.
Thank you. My name is Jeff Edmondson. I live at 1668 Cypress Drive here in Zionsville. Been a resident in town here since 2002. For the past 6 years, I've served on the Pathways Committee, and for the more than 4 years, I've been a member of the Parks Board. My purpose is to just give you a little bit of a description, an overview of what we've done over the last 4 years to arrive at the bond proposals that you have in front of you right now. When I say we, I mean the Parks Board. That's who I'm talking about. And some of our board members are here this evening. The town has done, over the last 4 years, 3 major planning tools, and we've taken a lead role in the development of those 3 major plan tools. One was the Strategic Trails Implementation Plan that we did in 2016, and that basically identified long-range, short-range projects for pathways and trails that would be used by bicyclists and pedestrians throughout the town. In 2017, we did the Overly Warman Park Development Plan, where we identified the features or activities that we wanted to put into that park. And in 2018, we completed this generation of the 5-year Parks Master Plan for the years 2018 to 22. And that basically was to identify major projects and activities. So while each of these products are important, I think one of the things that is more important to it possibly is the process. Because when we started this whole process of developing these 3 tools, we made a conscious decision to make it be a community-driven, public input-driven process. And so we decided that the public input was so important, we assigned some significant effort and activity to doing that. We had an advisory committee. We used focus groups, including several people who are in this room, or were earlier this evening, if some have left. We had user groups, bicycle clubs, for instance, and other organizations. We announced the process in the media and on the town website. We held public open houses where people could come in and put their hands on maps and show us what they wanted done. And we used the internet to get more input from the public. In all three of these processes, we used a similar pattern of public input. And most importantly, to our benefit, the public responded and was actively engaged in each of those planning processes. I'm not going to bury you with a bunch of numbers, and I know you're all tired, but a couple things are important, I think. In the Trails Implementation Plan, we had over 1,000 visits to our project website. We had over 800 contributions where people went on the website and actually used an internet tool called Wikimaps, not to be confused with anything else with Wiki, where people could identify locations where they wanted trails and pathways placed. And we held 3 public open houses, and I know several people here participated in those, and you might remember the yellow Post-it notes that we placed on table-sized maps of the town where people could identify where they wanted these features to go in. In the Overly Ormond project, we had the public identify over 30 features or activities they wanted us to include in that park. Obviously, we weren't able to adopt all of them, but we did adopt 17 or 18 out of the initial group. And in the 5-year master plan, the public identified 35 projects they felt worthy for consideration. Last year, when we presented to you the new 5-year Parks Master Plan, we also shared a list at that time, some of you may remember, of 19 projects we had identified. That was down from the 35 or more that the community had suggested we consider. But in that, we prioritized those projects in an A, B, C category, and we also told you that we would begin to address some of the smaller projects through our annual budgeting process, and that we'd be coming back to you with proposals when the bond possibilities were determined, with ideas and proposals for projects to be included in a bonding process. And now, what have we done over the last year? Well, we've begun addressing some of the smaller projects through our annual budget process with your assistance, beginning with 2 that we have initiated this year and 1 that we are putting in next year's proposed budget. We've narrowed down the projects that we originally talked about even from the 19, and we've updated the cost estimates for the projects to use 2019 numbers because our 5-year master plan was using 2017 actual costs for similar projects. On bonding, I would like to return to one item in the 5-year master plan process now. Can you help me with?
This is just a general question from the 5-year master plan. Do you want the bond one?
Bond one, right. This may be either the last page in your actual handout or the next to the last page. But in the 5-year master plan process, we used a similar survey to what we had used in the 2013 5-year master plan process. And almost all the questions were the same to get comparisons with what people felt had happened in the parks. But we added one question. In that question, we provided an explanation of what the bonding process meant for a parks activity like ours, and how that could impact. And we passed that through and developed that scenario with our finance people and our consultants. And we got answers to whether people felt that the bonding process to fund parks was a good idea. And what surprised me, first of all, was that we had 380 people who actually filled out the survey. Now, we all get surveyed every time we buy a cup of coffee, so we know how much time that takes. Almost all of the 380 people who responded did it via the internet. We had a few that turned in the hard copies at the library where we had set it up. but almost all did it through the internet. Of the 380, 344 people responded to this specific question. 270 of those either agreed somewhat or agreed strongly. 39 were neutral on using a bond, and 18, or a little over 5%, disagreed with the use of a bond for the parks projects. So what we had was an indication. It's not scientifically, statistically valid, but we had an indication that the public who understood the question were willing to use the bonding process for parks. So to conclude, this whole process of planning was community-driven, and we listened carefully to what the community gave us in the way of input. The public was very engaged in each process and definitely impacted each result. So what you have before you for consideration is a result of a lot of work and effort with our community, and we were advised by our consultants in all three processes that the degree of input and public engagement was significantly better here than what they had seen in other cities, of small and medium-sized cities across the state that they had worked with, that the community was definitely engaged.
Thank you, Jeff. I believe.
That finishes the presentation. So.
What's that?
That finishes the presentation.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Matt. County Councilor Jacobs, I believe, did you want to make a brief statement from the County Council Commissioners and Convention and Visitors Bureau on this?
I'm Steve Jacobs. I live in rural Boone County, north of Whitestown. And I rise today as a member of the Boone County Council and as a member of the Convention and Visitors Bureau. We offer a letter of support from both the council and the commission. Boone County Commissioners, Tom Santelli is here, in support of your efforts to get the grant. I think it's called Next Level Grant. And with that, well, it's a small token in terms of the money you've been talking about. We've given $3,000 to each one of the communities that are applying for this, including Zionsville. The Convention and Visitors Bureau offered the same type of letter, and we are giving $2,500 to each one of the communities that are applying for the Next Level Grant. So with the letter and that, we understand that the more support you have, the better off you are with those grants. So we've come up with that. So I would make one other comment. You know, like the Colts, Sunday gave out footballs, game balls to the players that have done the best. Well, the person that gets a game ball for this trail thing is Elise Nichella, the Vice President of the Boone County Council. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for the grants. We appreciate that. This is related to D and E. We'll start with D. This is a consideration of an ordinance approving Series 2019B Park District bonds. This is improvements at the Overly Warman Park. This was continued from the September 16th, 2019 meeting. This is ordinance number 2019-17. Councilors, any questions for Park President Edmondson or for Mr. Dickey on this particular request, whether it's financial or the need?
Yeah, but just a quick question. I mean, it's about $8 million in funding for both investments in the parks, and I'm a big proponent and supporter of the parks. Did I understand the rail portion of this is essentially for improvements and expansion of the rail trail, the second
The
piece?
bond related to trail improvements,
Right.
a lot of that focus will be the Big Four Rail Trail as projects get bid. If there's leftover monies, then there'll be other trails and parks that could be addressed.
Is there, and the only reason I'm asking is because I feel like, in my mind, we already have an investment there. It'd be nice to protect that investment by upgrading that you've discussed. Is there any opportunity to partially delay the Warman, the other park, where we, in other words, to make sure that we have the available funds to service the debt. I don't know if there's a timeline on that with the developers that we
I'm sure
require
there's
to
no
develop it.
legal commitment. I'm sure the developer would like to see that park developed sooner rather than later. I will tell you, the people who are moving in there, I get probably, I mean, it varies a little bit from season to season and as different plats come on, but I probably get a quarter, 1 to 3 calls from citizens that are thinking about moving in there or are moving in there. When is the trail going to be connected down to that? When is the park going to be developed? Those are the 2 questions that I get related to that. And that doesn't count the user groups that are interested in that, the hikers, the birders, the bicyclists, and those sorts of things. There isn't a legal requirement to do so, but the people who participate in this process, they're ready for this kind of development. So,
And Council Schuler, D is 3.375 million, E is 4.3 million for a total of 7.675 million.
Thanks.
Do we know if any of the debt service that we have now that's falling off January, February of next year, if any of that money is available for this? So we've got $897,000 falling off, and this is 367. Is any of the
I
funds
think what
falling
we've
off
heard
available?
from Tim is when debt service falls off, it can't be used for other stuff.
That levy would go away if there was not a debt service levy, if these were not approved. So I guess I'm confused by,
Maybe a different question, do we have some of the park bonds maturing here pretty quickly, right? Maybe that's what
the
Jason's.
park bond, there is only one park bond.
And
It's
it's how
the
much?
2007 bond.
And how much is left on that bond?
It matures 2022.
1.29.
Yes, I mean, the positive way to look at that, Jason, is that that's,
Yeah.
part of that is available.
Yeah.
But I think what we heard is that debt
Those dollars would not be collected, though, if there was not a debt service levy.
Understand. So really, on a net basis, you're at 6 million for both projects. Is that kind of right?
Yeah, like
Ballpark.
6.4 looks like.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, because then, it just, one would offset the other.
Yeah.
It's not new money, you don't move money. There's no levy.
But if we didn't approve it, we wouldn't get that money, period, right?
That is
Correct.
Correct.
You could approve it at a later date, though, but.
Yes.
It would delay when you would have a tax levy for that, though, because you have construction period that you would not be having a levy for during those first few years. So it's not anticipated that the levy would take place until 2022.
And when does that debt roll off? That rolls off before 2022, right?
22.
December of 2020, or January of 2022, as it
Perfect.
showed on the
Thank you.
slides.
Any other questions on this? Or I would take a motion on this one.
I'll move approval.
Got a first from Councilor Suarez,
Second.
second from Councilor Hopper. Just because I don't know.
To introduce, isn't it?
This is just to introduce on first reading. Yes.
Sorry, can I amend my motion to move to introduce on first reading?
Sure. Would you like to second that, Councilor Hopper?
Second.
Okay. I'm going to gamble here and say all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Motion to introduce ordinance number 2019-17 on first reading passes with a vote of 7 in favor, 0 opposed. Next up, we've got a consideration of an ordinance approving Series 2019C Park District bonds. These are trailway improvements, including the Big Four Rail Trail. This is continued from the September 16, 2019 meeting. This is ordinance number 2019-18. Any other questions or discussion from councilors on this one? Or
I just have a quick question.
Sure.
On the next generation.
Next level trails, yeah.
Thank you. I think I came up with a name. You think I'd remember these things. When is that application? How much money are we asking for?
We are working on what the application will be asked for. This time it will be a little bit more because in level 1, which no Central Atlantic group except Speedway got funded in level 1, the round 1 of the first level. They gave us some things that we could do to strengthen ours. So for example, that trailhead that I mentioned, that was an item that they mentioned in the latest study that might be helpful. So we're plugging those things in. Those final numbers haven't been. The earlier one was 1.9 million ask.
So substantial.
So yeah, substantial. And it's up to 80% on the state side, but they don't do a point system, but they give preference to those who are covering more than their base 20%. And we were at 28% last time, and we're trying to beef that up as well.
Well, I'm sure with the help that we've gotten from the county and from the tourism office, thank you for that. I know that that'll enhance our
More fiscal
availability and our-
partners help, and so that's
Yeah.
2 more fiscal partners in our application than we had before.
That's fantastic. Thank you for that.
Any other questions? This is again a motion I'll make a motion, I guess, to introduce on first reading.
Second.
I heard a second from Councilor Suarez. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion to introduce ordinance number 2019-18 on first reading passes with a vote of 7 in favor, 0 opposed. Next up, we have a consideration of an ordinance vacating a platted and recorded utility easement in the Stonegate subdivision. This is a second reading and a final vote. This is ordinance number 2019-20. Deputy Mayor Mitro, anything you'd like to add on this one?
At this hour, not a word.
Okay. Fair enough.
Are they basically just wanting that for more yard?
It allows.
Speaking to the mic, sorry. Just,
I was telling you to tell you that.
will you state your name and address?
You want it in Russian?
No.
or English?
Ooh, I'll take it.
It allows the developer more flexibility on how he can place houses on that lot. It backs up to that common area, and there's no, within that platted easement, there is no infrastructure. So it just allows him a little more flexibility on product.
Is there a land value associated to this that will be given back to the town or to the, like, how is this, I mean, the fact that it's an easement, you still purchase the whole land, right? So it's not like there's a value associated to it that anybody gets back?
No, there's really not. Unlike a right-of-way, when we vacate an alley,
That's kinda
there
what I
is a
was
dollar
thinking.
figure because you're gaining property.
Correct.
You're not gaining land here, you're gaining a little more use of your land because you don't have that encumbrance to the back.
Correct. Okay, thank you.
I will, unless there's any other questions, I'll make a motion to adopt on final reading.
Second.
Got a second from Vice President Trailer. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Ordinance number 2019-20 is adopted by a vote of 7 in favor, 0 opposed. Next is the appointment of 2 appraisers to complete an appraisal of a portion of the former Rail Trail Gardens property. This is for the planned street and stormwater department facility. I assume we need to vote on this despite the turning down of the facility, correct?
Can you just remove it from the agenda since it's no longer relevant?
I'll defer to Deputy Mayor.
It was approval of 2 appraisers that we had provided to you, so you would probably still want to vote it down.
Yeah, just to
at this
be
point,
official.
Because you voted down the actual project itself. It's pretty much redundant at this point.
All right, well,
It doesn't matter because they couldn't move forward without your
That's
approval,
correct.
but it's whatever you guys are comfortable with.
I mean, procedurally, can we just skip it? Or do you, is it just best practice to vote it and just get it over
I
with?
would vote it down and then we can have it
Alright.
reintroduced so we don't have it in limbo.
Okay, then I will make a motion to deny.
But make a motion to
Approve and then
to
everybody
consider.
denies, yeah.
And then everybody can vote no if
Oh.
everyone wants to. That just makes it so you
All
don't
right,
sign.
I will make a motion to approve. Better?
That's fine.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, now, if you vote yes, don't vote yes, it will complicate things. All in favor? All opposed?
Aye.
Okay, the motion is not passed. 0 in favor, 7 opposed. There we go. All right. Hey, we're on to new business. There we go. Okay, we've got a consideration of an ordinance to rezone approximately 5.22 acres from the rural AZ Airport District to the rural AG Agricultural Zoning Classification. This is known as the Van Sickle Petition. This is a final reading and vote, and it's ordinance number 2019-21. Mr. DeLong, do you want to speak on this first, or Ms. Gerard? However you'd like to handle this?
Good evening, thank you. Happy to speak to this matter. Since the petitioner's agent is here this evening, or Ron Strader's agent is here this evening. This is a petition that's in front of you this evening as a forwarded from your Plan Commission with a favorable recommendation of 5-2. This is a rezoning as indicated by the Town Council President from the AZ classification to the AG Again, this is a recommendation, favorable recommendation from your Plan Commission.
Very good. And Ms. Gerard, I think the legal for the petitioner is here to speak on this as well. Sorry, Kevin.
Yes, thank you, Commissioners. My name is Melissa Gerard. I'm an attorney in Lebanon. I'm here to represent Raymond Van Sickle, who is the applicant, but I have with me tonight a prospective purchaser who's still here. Oh, yes, he's hiding in the back, Mr. Ball. No one is really sure how this property ever got zoned to the AZ district to begin with. The owner, Mr. Van Sickle, did not consent. The attorney for the Hamilton County Aviation Board admitted in the hearing before the Plan Commission that the parcel is the only single property included within the AZ district which is not owned by the airport. It is the only parcel within the AZ district that is owned by a private owner. This is not fair. If the Aviation Board wants to acquire the property, they certainly have the right to do that. They have the power of eminent domain, just like you do, and they can acquire it and pay for it if they want to do that at any time. But they have never shown any interest in doing that since the sale in 2002 or 2003. However, under the circumstances of this case, it is especially not fair when one considers the history of this property, this parcel, insofar as the residential use of this parcel was established before the airport was ever developed. Unlike much of the surrounding area, the residential use of this parcel predates the establishment of the airport. The existing house on the property was built in the 1950s before the development of the airport. In fact, it is consistent with the neighboring residential uses and the comprehensive plan, and except for one small parcel actually owned by the airport, all of the parcels along both sides of 1100 East are actually used as rural agricultural residential uses. Everything is there. While it is the intent of Mr. Van Sickle to parcel off a bit of the acreage for a new house to sell to Mr. Ball, this rezoning would be necessary whether or not we planned for a new house or not. And I say that because with the current existing AZ zoning, we cannot even make improvements for the benefit of the existing home on the property, which, mind you, not only predates the establishment of the AZ ordinance zone classification, but also predates the establishment of the airport itself. To further understand the history of the airport's relationship with residential development in this area, I need to take you back to 2003, shortly after Hamilton County purchased the airport. At that time, a rezoning proposal came before the Boone County Area Plan Commission and subsequently the Boone County Commissioners. That project was called Abbott Farms at the time, but it has later become the subdivisions known as Brookhaven and Fieldstone. That project was comprised of 228 acres for which they proposed 358 lots. At the time, and this is a very important point that I need you to remember throughout my presentation, that property was zoned AG, agricultural. The developers sought a change to R2. This is an important distinction that completely addresses anything that Hamilton County has filed in their paperwork that they filed late Friday afternoon. In contrast, we are only seeking to restore the original AZ zoning, which somehow got changed on a private landowner's lot against his will. But go back to Abbott Farms, Fieldstone, Brookhaven for a minute. As you know, residential development in the AG district, the agricultural district, is pretty restricted. Major subdivisions are not permitted and were not permitted at the time. And minor subdivisions are only allowed by special exception. It is very hard to build a house in an AG district in this county anywhere. So the maximum number of houses that would have been permitted on the Abbott Farms, Brookhaven, Fieldstone property prior to the rezoning in 2003 was maybe 10 houses on the entire 228 acres. I think there were actually 2 parcels that comprised that, so 5 each, okay? That's a minor subdivision on each parcel. But the rezoning to R2 allowed an additional 348 acres or units, 348 houses, over and above what would have been permitted under the AG zoning, which is all we're seeking to restore. Abbott Farms, Brookhaven, Fieldstone is actually is also, and this is another distinction, Abbott Farms, Brookhaven, Fieldstone is actually in a legally defined noise-sensitive area. This parcel is not. Neither is any proposed tall structure proposed for this project. The runway at the airport runs north-south. Planes take off and land from the south. Abbott Farms, Brookhaven, Fieldstone may be further away on the ground, but in the air, they are actually much closer to the aircraft. Given the glide path of the runway, we calculated that the second-story bedrooms and the northern limits of those subdivisions may only be separated from, at most, from active jet engines by about 90 feet over the rooftop. And if the runway were extended, it could decrease to something like 45 to 60 feet over the rooftop. In contrast, this property is not in the glide path at all. There is some activity maybe with taxiing activities and hangars, but the hangars don't look a whole lot different than pole barns that you see in the AG district anyway. So from that perspective, I don't think that they're really particularly detrimental. The engines are not running as loud or at high speed on taxi, which is what you have on the northern limits where this property is located on the north part of the airport. So, and in their letter that they submitted Friday afternoon, the Aviation Board doesn't suggest that they plan to build a crosswind runway that will somehow impact this property. The only thing they mention is a few hangars, which is fine. They look like pole barns, so I don't think it's inconsistent with anything that we're proposing for the AG district. But back to Abbott Farms. Did we think that changing the zoning in such a noise-sensitive area from AG to R2 to allow an additional 348 homes that were not otherwise allowed was a bad idea? Yeah, we did. Did we try to get the Boone County Area Plan Commission and the Boone County Commissioners and Hamilton County themselves to take precautions like getting navigation easements? We did, yes. Did they listen to us? No. In fact, the Aviation Board actually came in and cut us off at the knees. Not only did they not stay silent on this, but they actually came in and affirmatively supported the developer who was proposing to put 358 homes on that parcel. And I submitted in the Plan Commission file, but you should have access to it as well. There's a letter from the president of the Aviation Board that says, and I'll quote it so you hear it, "We are aware of the location of the proposed Abbott Farm subdivision and do not have any objection to single-family homes being erected on that property. We do want future owners of these homes to be notified of the existence of the airport. In that regard, we believe that the current notice requirements of Indiana law found at Indiana Code 821-10-1 or 10-21-10-1 should be sufficient for that purpose. We would like to have the covenants for this subdivision as acknowledgement of the existence of the Terry Airport, which is now Exec Airport, and that the air traffic that results from the airport. We are requesting any sort of special, we are not requesting any special notice beyond that which is required by law or waivers of rights or navigation easements from the landowners." And it is copied to Mr. Howard, who is here tonight as well. They didn't have to do this. They did everything possible to support an additional 358 houses on the south end in a noise-sensitive area that would not have existed but for their agreement to them. We would not have remonstrated against Abbott Farms, Brookhaven, Fieldstone had it been developed in accordance with what would have been permitted by the existing AG zone. Absolutely not. That's all we're asking, is the AG zone, which is prevalent and consistent in this area. If they have had complaints from Brookhaven and Fieldstone, that is their own fault. They have no one to blame but themselves. they agreed to those 358 houses in their noise-sensitive area. At this point, the horse is kind of out of the barn, and they're the ones who opened the door. Brookhaven and Fieldstone, which came into existence by virtue of their own action, do not justify the denial of this application. Number one, unlike Brookhaven and Fieldstone, the residential use of this parcel predates the airport itself.
Mr. Rutter, are we on the home stretch here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, about to finish up. Sorry, I'm
Thank
in a
you.
hurry too. My husband's trying to get to Michigan tonight.
No problem.
Two, unlike Brookhaven and Fieldstone, we are only seeking to restore the AG zoning previously applicable, not seeking R2 zoning. Three, unlike Brookhaven and Fieldstone, we are not in a noise-sensitive area, nor are we in alignment with the runway. Four, unlike Brookhaven and Fieldstone, the zoning we are seeking is actually consistent with all of our neighbors along 1100 East. Five, plus, even though our parcel has nothing to do with Brookhaven and Fieldstone, per our commitment to the Plan Commission, we have agreed to all of the same written commitments that the Aviation Board specifically confirmed in writing were acceptable, and we've submitted those to your staff. In fact, they are even better off with our commitments in this case because even though the property is currently zoned AZ, the current existing house on the property predates the development of the airport, and thus the owner would have grounds for a common law nuisance claim against the airport, not merely an annoying little phone call. The covenants and commitments we have proposed will cover the existing house as well, so we will eliminate any actual litigation risk to the airport as a result of the existing house. The airport authority's arguments that you will set a precedent and open the floodgate for future large-scale residential development by approving this petition is patently absurd. This is AG zoning we are talking about. Major subdivisions are not allowed in AG zoning. You need a special exception just to build a single house. I seriously doubt that the developers that the Aviation Board suggests that they have been talking to are anticipating developing any property in the area under the AG zoning we are seeking without a change to a more intense zone classification. We are not setting any sort of precedent for the upzoning to a more intense use than AG. So in sum, I would ask you to just confirm the Plan Commission favorable recommendation, restore the AG zoning that was applicable to this property originally and was somehow changed against my client's consent, and which has the staff support and is consistent with all the other uses in the neighborhood along 1100 East.
Thank you, Mr. Yard. Mr. Howard, sorry, just one second. I just got to get through one thing. Sorry, Kevin, then we can go through things. I've got a request to speak for you. Per the rules, request to speak. You're allotted 3 minutes. I'll time you. I'll give you a 1-minute warning.
I can't respond to all that.
I understand, but if you can give your name and address, and I'll start timing you
My name is Michael
after you're
Howard.
done.
My office is 694 Logan Street in Noblesville, Indiana. I've been the attorney for the Hamilton County Airport Authority, or Board of Aviation Commissioners, now the Airport Authority, for since they purchased the airport in 2003. Interesting fact that was not brought up in that long presentation is that Hamilton County and now the Airport Authority purchased the airport from Ray Van Sickle, who is the petitioner in this case. The airport is regulated by both federal and state law. In federal law, we have to make certain assurances to the FAA that we will do everything possible to prohibit or limit non-compatible uses with the airport. Now, this piece of property is on the east side of 1100, and its eastern back fence touches the airport property. It touches the airport property where there are plans to build private hangars. As a public use airport, the airport has been, since Mr. Van Sickle owned it, subject to, it's got to be open 24 hours a day so people can come in and land at any time. The terminal may not be open, the gas pumps may not be open, but people can land, and people will be going in and out of be going in and out of those hangars. The purpose here is to try to make sure that there are non-compatible uses. The Abbott's Farm thing, I don't know what the big deal was, but at that time, it was in the noise-sensitive area, and we demanded what we were entitled to under state law, that they put a noise-sensitive covenant in it. I don't know what Mr. Gerard or Mr. Van Sickle, I think that's the we that objected to it. I don't know that they really had a dog in that fight, but they sure got worked up about it, again, even this evening. So we believe that it is not compatible. The FAA says it's not compatible, and your ordinance says that single-family residents are not compatible in an AZ zone because they are not permitted. So you answered your own question when it was an AZ zone that a single-family residence is not permitted. They have agreed that they are trying to get AG so they can go to the BZA and get a single-family residence there. They put the covenants there, that's good, but that doesn't mean they're not calling us or they're not calling you, as happened in the Abbott's Farm situation. There's covenants there, they still complain. This purchaser likes the airport, he wants to be there, he wants his kids to be there, but when he's gone and sells the property, then we're just kicking the can down the road and causing another problem.
Thank you, Mr. Howard.
And
Yeah.
that was when I was going to quit anyway. Thank you, Mr.
Perfect. Good
Chairman.
timing. No. I think Mr. Spees or Councilor Spees had a couple of questions.
There's a home on it now that somebody lives in?
I don't, Tom? Yes.
So that's against the ordinance, wait, what you just said. I've not read the ordinance, I don't know.
Yeah, and the home predates the ordinance, it predates the existence of the airport. And I was going to suggest, in his reference to the FAA assurances, they assumed those at the time of the sale. They were in effect at the time the Abbott Farms project came through, which they agreed to, which was in a much more troublesome area than where we are, and it involved a whole lot more homes. And even though we don't have to, we have agreed to give everything that they asked for from Abbott Farms. We are giving voluntarily to address any of their concerns. We've given everything that they said was okay for those 358 homes. I've been through the Brookhaven covenants, I've been through the written commitments on the ordinance, and I've put it all in and given it to your staff to review. But the FAA assurances, those were in place, and they didn't prohibit them from agreeing to Abbott Farms with those covenants.
So in the little over 5 acres in AG, how many homes could we put on that?
Just the one that's there and one more, that's it.
Thank you.
You can't put any more.
Mr. Ball, do you know that there's an airport next door? Yes. Do you know that planes are allowed? Yes. Okay. Any other questions?
I just wanted to know what ordinance we're going against if we, you mentioned that we have our own ordinance that we would be violating if we let this happen?
In your AZ zone.
So if we rezone, that would not be an issue?
Right,
Correct.
if it
Okay.
wasn't zoned.
And has there been any houses or residences been built on airport grounds since Hamilton County purchased the land?
They built one house that is for the 24-hour manager.
So somebody lives there?
He's an employee.
So you built a home and somebody lives there?
Yeah,
Okay.
he's an employee, and he's part of the airport operation, yes.
Thank you.
So you build a home on the land against the ordinance, is what you're telling us?
Yeah. I think we got a variance, I'm not sure.
You said that it was against the ordinance from AZ to build a home on it, and you just told us that the airport built a home for somebody to live on there against the ordinance.
But it's solely for somebody that works for the airport. He's not going to be complaining about the noise.
And I don't think somebody that's going to live right next door to the fence backs up the airport's going to say, gosh, I didn't know there was an airport here, landing planes. To me, that seems asinine. Anyway.
I'm sorry I was asking.
Thank you.
Any other questions here? Or I would take a motion.
I'd make a motion to approve on final reading.
I'll second.
I've got a first from Vice President Trailer, second from Councilor Spees, and a chuckle from Councilor Spees. Third from Councilor Suarez. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Ordinance number 2019-21 is adopted by a vote of 7 in favor, 0 opposed.
Sir, for the record, does that include the covenants that she proposed?
That- As filed. As filed, and it was approved by the Planning Commission. Thank you, Mr. Howard. Okay, home stretch here. B is a consideration of an ordinance to adopt the 2020 budget for the town of Zionsville. This is a public hearing and also a first reading. This is ordinance number 2019-22. Deputy Mayor Mitro, Mayor Hawk, you seem to be wandering towards the podium.
I can't remember who was supposed to start.
Well, looks like you.
I will. The process will follow tonight. Similar but more brief process that we had at the budget workshop. The budget for you is a balanced budget. It does include 3.5% raise in salaries for staff. It does meet the reserve and liquidity policy that we adopted for the department operating balances of between 15 and 20%. It does assume all departments will spend 100% of their budget. We know that does not occur. We do realize savings each year for events such as these one-time expenses that you will see tonight. Otherwise, the budget was kept flat, except for the known increases in funds. A couple of highlights in there. There is some funding for a major infrastructure project that ZYSA is undergoing. We've allotted a small amount of funds to help pay for some infrastructure, safety improvements, think a new exit for their parking lot, and assistance with their ACEL and DCEL lanes on County Road 700. One other highlight, nope, that was it. Okay.
Do we know the 3.5% increase in salary? What's the net or the total on that?
For the entire budget?
Well, I meant, no, as far as if that's what they were increasing the salaries, I mean, assuming, so then they're going to get an increase in their retirement and other things also.
It's an up to 3.5%.
Okay.
Subject to their annual reviews, yeah. But their retirement, if they opt into the 457 plan that we match, while we do have a great participation, that is accounted in each department line item as well for their their 457 match contribution. The total amount, off the top of my head, I don't. But it's within each department in their salaries and.
Well, I've got it. This is actually a public hearing. I do have proof of publication. If anyone from the public is still awake and would like to discuss this, feel free to come to the podium. I'll open this public hearing. All right, I will close the public hearing. Any other questions on this introduction, the first reading on the budget?
We have more if you want.
I would just, real quick, just since I opened the door on this a long time ago, just to be clear, the $1.2 million differential is money that was saved in reserves that's being spent in a lump sum capacity. It's not, we're not over budget, correct?
Correct. And that list of items was provided in an email.
Yeah.
Project-specific items, so.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
I've got a first from Councilor Speeds. I've got a second from Councilor Plunkett.
That would be to introduce on first reading.
That is to introduce on first reading. That is correct. All in favor? Aye. All opposed?
Nay.
Motion to introduce ordinance number 2019-22 on first reading passes with a vote of 6 in favor, 1 opposed. Last on new business is a consideration of a proclamation of the Zionsville Town Council in support of the Zionsville Community Schools 2 referendum on the upcoming November ballot. This has me talking about it. This was something that I thought was important. Prior councils have supported our schools. I won't speak for everyone, but I believe that schools drive property values. Schools drive people wanting to move here. Schools are the reason why I moved here. And so working with Dr. Robinson, working with Deputy Mayor Mitro, working with Mayor Hawk, we came up with this proclamation in support. It is non-binding. It has nothing to do with the actual voting. It's just a way of council showing support or against what I think is something that is important, both the operating referendum and the funding for facilities. Any questions or comments on this proclamation?
No, I would just applaud you for doing this. I think in prior councils, we have done similar efforts, and they have carried weight to be able to have public officials support our schools.
Yeah,
So
appreciate that. Thank
I'm
you.
very pleased that you did that. I'm very supportive.
Thank you. I learn from the past. Well, I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
We have a second, Vice President Traylor. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Approved by a vote of 7 in favor, 0 opposed. We have no other matters. We've got claims. Take a motion.
So moved.
Oh my gosh, that's everyone at once. I'm going to say Councilor Suarez was first and Councilor Spies was second. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Claims are approved, 7 in favor, 0 opposed. I will make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
I'll go Councilor Hopper on that one. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? We are adjourned by a vote of 7 in favor, 0 opposed. The next regular town council meeting is scheduled for Monday, October 21st, 2019 at 7:30 a.m. in the Zionsville Town Hall Council Chamber. There's a few things signing coming down your guys' way, so hang tight here for 2 more minutes.